Yeah, this 45 minutes, it's everything about fear, uncertainty, and banking credentials. Why I've chosen that title, you will quickly learn or see. And if I put it on, it will even work or not. I just replace it by the other one. And it installs the device driver software. Until then, I can use the mouse. Okay, my name is Adrian Wiesmann. I'm working for a Swiss financial institute. And I'm working there as an IT security officer, so to pester, to annoy, to help make the system more secure is just my normal day work. Just as a disclaimer at the beginning, as I said, I work for a financial institute. So everything I say here is my own opinion, does not necessarily reflect the opinion of my employer. All the credential types I'm talking about are only meant as examples and no specific products. So yeah, about the motivation, why I started or why I wanted to give that talk. There was a TV show in Swiss TV some time ago, about half a year or something. And I thought it would be probably a good idea to just talk about credentials. What are they? Why are they like they are? Where are the problems we have with those? And I thought it would be good to do some kind of taxonomy to just raise the bar so that we have the same vocabulary to talk about credentials. I then put up that agenda, and I was halfway through when I recognized that making that taxonomy isn't good enough. So I thought about doing some kind of taxonomy, but then talk about the credentials themselves. But you will notice when we are there. Just as a starter, why are we in the mess today, or in this mess today? Why are we talking about credentials? Or, yeah. It's probably just a quick reminder for you. It's probably nothing new. But the main thing is, or the main point is, we have that problem between bank-owned hardware or software and privately or customer-owned hardware software. In the beginning, there were these ATMs, or somewhen in the beginning, there were these ATMs, and most of, or everything of this was bank-owned. Bank decided which software is used, which hardware is used. Usually the space they rented was rented by the bank, so they had the whole spectrum of security in their own hands, physical and IT security. Someday the customer-owned computers came into the story. So there was the beginning of online banking, and there was some part of the whole system which was then customer-owned. And so the customer decided what to update, when to update, what hardware to use, etc. Nowadays it's even getting worse. We have some other devices which we don't really are used to. We lose them, we take them with us. It's not getting any better. But let's set the stage. So what are we talking about? What is in this whole banking or online banking part? What kind of objects are there? I made some abstraction, and you see from right to left there are the banking servers like the web server, the credential server or something. Then the firewall, the internet as a cloud, the computer owned by the customer, then some kind of credential, whatever type there is, and the user itself. And for this talk, I'm focusing on the leftmost part, mostly because I just said, okay, the server part, the banks usually know what they do, so they know what they have on their servers, they harden it. The firewall's the same, it's bank owned, so they usually know what they do. Internet, I just said, okay, we use SSL. If it's correctly used, should work. On the computer, I didn't want to focus because there are other talks focusing only on that one. So I said, okay, we go to the credential and the user only. So I tried to make some credential groups just to have some logical groups of these different credentials. And I started with grouping by connection. First, I really tried to do some grouping or some taxonomy, which could have every aspect of these credentials in it, and then you could just make some marks and have your for one special type of credential, you have your profile. This doesn't unfortunately work, so I made this grouping. Grouping by connection means either you have that credential plugged into your computer. That would be the rightmost, so you have it directly connected. You have it indirectly connected, like a flickering solution, where you have some kind of communication between the computer and that device. And then you have that disconnected state where you have some kind of a calculator where you do something with it. Then I made the next grouping by user interface. There are some components which have no screen, like USB sticks or something. You have some small character output, like with the calculator kind of things, and there are even credentials which have a screen, like a mobile device or something. And the last grouping I made is by secret. So with what internals does this credential work? They said, okay, we have a shared secret, like some kind of ITAN list, which you share with the bank. You have a certificate-based credential or mechanism, and you have a one-time pad-based mechanism. And there you can either generate these one-time pad or one-time passwords yourself, or have it pre-generated for you by the bank. So I then took these different credentials we have there on the market and tried to place them to these different groups I just made. And again, these are just examples. So we have some kind of ITAN. I tried to group these together with what kind of connection does it have? It is disconnected. What kind of UI does it have? It's some kind of table. On what kind of secret does it work? And what I added then is what kind of attack surface does it have? So how could it be exploited? How could it be misused by an attacker? For the ITAN, it's quite clear you could copy it. There were some cases where attackers just asked for just send me your next 10 ITANs, and there were users which really copied their ITAN number, their next 10, to that web interface. So it's for social engineering, it's not foolproof as well. I took as next example, I took that USB stick. It's directly connected, it has no UI, it's certificate-based, and the attack here is, I guess some of you heard that talk by Max last year. You could either do a remote USB, so you just can, from a remote computer, you can access that USB stick. You can connect the smart card via PKCS11 as an attacker yourself. So there's some way of exploiting that as well. Then I took the M10, used sometimes by the banks. It's indirectly connected. You have a normal screen. It's one-time pad-based, and it's not foolproof against social engineering, SIM swapping, which means somebody goes to Swisscom or whichever service provider and asks them to replace his SIM card, which is then basically yours. And you have then his SIM card, the attacker has your SIM card and can then receive your SMSs. So that again isn't foolproof as well. There's again some attack vector. And the last one I added is a certificate-based challenge response. So that is indirectly connected as well. You have a normal screen. It has a certificate as a secret, and the attack surface here again is social engineering, or can be social engineering. And this is nothing really new, I guess. So I took another step, analyzed these different situations, and quickly noticed all of these have either direct communication, which means it uses the same communication channel the normal banking session takes, or you have an indirect communication like the M10, but again you have that communication somehow. And the best of all is the banks usually don't have direct connection to the credential, and if they have, it's usually not mutual. So the end point of the SSL usually is not that trusted device of the bank. It's the computer. And so, just another quick reminder, the computer is not bank-owned. The computer is customer-owned, so there is no chance for the bank to enforce any policies to make sure it's patched, it has the hardware you want or the bank wants to have, etc. So this means all these systems have, per definition, the same attack surface or a similar attack surface, and at least on a higher level. And which means if you have no trusted endpoint, you have no 100% security protection. You can't have that, which probably comes quite as a surprise for all of you. But the best of all is there is hope, and this is actually the basic or the base part of that talk. What is the hope? What actually should we talk about, or what actually is the part we should talk about? It's risk. Risk can be a chance. At least that is what the business always talks about. But what does this mean? What does this mean for you as the customer or for the bank? The first part I'd like to talk about is numbers. Let's take a very simple calculation. You are a bank. You have a million customers, or a million online banking customers, and this means you have a credential. You have to release these, or you have to send these credentials out to your customers. Just a wild guess. If you take some kind of hardware Tamagotchi thingy, it will cost you $30 or Swiss francs, whichever you like. Which means if you have a million customers, this means 30 million you just have for delivering that hardware, for having it there, and for someone replacing it, because these have, if their battery run and you don't put them in the USB part, somewhere the battery will be empty, which means you have to replace this hardware. So 30 million every few years. There can be quite a few fraud cases to have the similar expenses you have. So actually, When talking about credentials, you're not only talking about security, you're talking about risk, and you're talking about money, ultimately. So 30 million is quite a big number. Um, of course, nobody will ever talk about fraud cases, but I guess the 30 franc per hardware isn't that far away or far-fetched. Probably with some hardware it's even more. And probably if you only talk about hardware costs, you don't have the help desk calls, the customers which call in to ask, oh, it's not working, the replacements you have to have, the processes you have to have internally. So as I said, we talk about numbers when talking about banking credentials. The second point I'd like to talk about is reputation. Have you ever heard about a company going tits up, bankrupt, because of whatever happened to them, except Digitask? Now, I'm really talking about a company which went tits up because they had a huge fuck up of their login or whatever. I don't know of any. Probably there are some, but they are quite, if there are, they can't be that big. So all that talk about, ooh, your reputation, etc., is, in my personal opinion, overrated. If there is really something happening, either you won't ever hear about that, or perhaps it hurts the company, but after a year, 2, 3, 4, don't know. That's probably over, and nobody will ever remember it. When I made these slides, I thought about eToy and eToys. You probably heard that story, early 90s, I guess. That was a eToy, which is that group of, don't know how they call themselves, just artists, something. And there was that company eToys, and that's they wanted to sell their toys, and there was that big fight between each other, and eToys isn't living anymore. So that's the only company I remembered which really went tits up because they made a wrong decision, but it had nothing to do with anything security there. The third part is, well, I've written there transaction monitoring, but it goes much further. When talking about a banking system or online banking, the authentication is not the only part we're talking about. We're talking about transaction monitoring, some backend processing, some whatnot. So only because the transaction or the login was cracked doesn't mean the money is going out to the attackers. It might, but it does not necessarily have to do. You probably were phoned up by your credit card company, someone in your life. They asked you, are you really sure that you want to buy now this whatever? And they actually do exactly the same as the banks or some of the banks, don't know the others, do. It's just having a backend process which does try to find out if they're attacked or not. So even to talk about I was able to execute that login or take over that login for you, it doesn't necessarily mean the money is away. And what's also a point is we need to differentiate between the authentication and all the rest. So if your authentication fails, probably you have some transaction signing in the front end where you really have to sign all of your transactions. So you really have to say, okay, I want to do this transaction. I will come back to that in a little later. Now that one fails as well. I could change again. Until it works again, I go to this slide. Also, I said now these 3 points about the yeah, there are other systems or other mechanisms to make a system secure. My personal opinion is that every franc or every dollar or whatever they get is wrong. So my personal opinion is, although we do this calculation, also we have to do that calculation, what to do and what has the better return on investment. Even if they get 1 franc, they are supported, so they can move on, and B, they will come back. When it worked once, they will come back for a second time, and so on. So don't let them win. Other points to consider. There is there's actually that point here, usability. And one is, what actually do the users know what they do? Yes, you have that credential where you log in with, you have a card, you place it in some kind of card reader, you enter a PIN, and then you get a challenge response kind of communication with the bank. You log in, and everything's fine. If you use the same device for a transaction signature, the user actually has no idea what he signs. He can't see it. He has that, he will get some kind of number, anything, but he signs that, but he has no idea what he signs. Even if you have a better or another credential, say you have some kind of display something, where you can display the amount, whom to pay to, whatever. Users, do they really know what they do? Do they really know what they sign? Do they really read it? If they have to do it every time, they probably just click through because they knew it from the last 300 times that it was correct. Why shouldn't it be correct this time? You don't have the browser under your control. It could be anything on there. Miko had this example this morning. Probably there is some notice which says we have that contest. Send us your money and you will win a Wii. And the user then wants to submit that money. He really wants it, and he will make everything that the transaction will go through. He will even phone up to say, you stopped my transaction, why? So even that you have transaction signing, it does not necessarily have to work because of the user. Either he isn't able to decide on the information you give him, or he's tricked into accept it anyway. So there's even the question, some banks do whitelisting, which means you have your first transaction to account A, and the second time you send to account A, you don't have to sign transactions anymore. This is only because they don't want to make it too common for the user to sign their transactions. Otherwise, it's too common, and they don't look at it anymore. But yeah, again, this isn't foolproof. So there could be some fraud cases as well. Another point is this here, portabilities for canoes. Actually, some guy at Microsoft said that, but because of their development thing. But I found that the sentence is nice for this slide. On Monday, some financial institute will release a complete mobile banking client, so you can do all your banking stuff with the mobile phone, which means you need some kind of credential you can take with you. You can take with that solution. You can use with that solution. Now, USB stick definitely won't work. You could have some keyboard on a credit card. That could work, but then you have to take the credit card with you, and this this kind of move they don't like. So if ever you are at the conference and then they show you a credit card with a keyboard on it, just do like this a little bit, and they will hate you there. You could have a third device, like Tamagotchi, like the calculator stuff, something. Then you always have to carry a new device with you. An access card like the i10 I showed before, you can have in your purse. That will probably work, but then again, we are back at the i10, which we actually want to move away from. So talking about portability is really a problem. What kind of credentials are there you can take with you? What kind of credentials are there which still are usable for the user and still portable? So there are many credentials on the market, but when talking about all of these points, many will fall out of your shortlist or will not even join it. There was actually a talk before, not sure how many of you were listening to it from Swisscom in the other room, just before this talk here, where they talked about mobile ID. Again, you take it with you, which is cool, but you have the same communication channels. Like when you do mobile banking, you have the same communication channels for the banking as you have for the authentication or the signing, which isn't ideal. It could work if everything works, but it's not ideal. So really there is a problem what kind of credential really works. And if you want to do a kickoff and you have a good idea, I guess there's quite much money to make there. So actually, we could talk about trusted devices, or we should talk about trusted devices, but then what is a trusted device? It should end the SSL session, so it really is clear that everything you see is legitimate, is really originating from the bank. It should be portable, it should be user-friendly. Yeah, what is that trusted device? Probably you will need to update that from afar. So you need some kind of updating mechanism, remote access kind of thing, which means there is another attack surface, or at least a potential attack surface. If you don't make it updatable, probably you will have to replace it somewhere in its lifetime because you found a bug which you didn't find prior to the rollout. There were many ideas like CD-ROMs. You enter the CD-ROM to your CD drive and then you boot it from that one. At least you have the software part solved, but I'm not sure how many users will use that. You have to shut down your machine, enter the CD, boot it again, do your banking stuff, shut it down again, boot it again with your OS. Not very sure if it's that usable. What I've seen is there's that $25, or is it British pound? Now I guess it's dollar computer. Could be a possibility that bank customers get a complete laptop from their bank just for doing online banking. Again, you would have to update that one. So again, another attack surface. You see where this is heading to. So to end that, I've seen I'm a little bit earlier than planned. So you can have more questions then. This is really talking about credentials is actually always, Miko said it again this morning, cat and mouse. Whatever is rolled out, somewhere it's cracked. And cracking it isn't really very much a problem. It's just a question of time. and mostly resources and probably knowing something about it. So at the end, it's always calculating the risk, having a look at what is possible, with what risks can you live, how big will the losses be, and then you will decide which credentials you roll out. But every credential I've seen so far is hackable, or at the end, the user can be hacked or social engineered into submitting the payment anyway. So, questions? Yes, please. The microphone, well.
So you touched on usability and security, and you said basically in the end it's a business decision on how much risk you want to take. So how much security you try to put onto the customer and how much security you do on the back-end side, like transaction monitoring. Now, if you look at a lot of US banking websites, they only ask for username and password. They don't have this Tamagotchi stuff, as you mentioned them. So Swiss banks, most of them make it extremely hard to log in for the user. I mean, it takes a lot of time to just log in because they have all these additional security things. You need to wait for an SMS. You need to, whatever, type some challenge response stuff, which is extremely tedious for users. So why is it that Swiss banks have all these additional security things on the authentication side if it's in the end basically, I guess, the same business decision as the US banks do, where apparently username and password is good enough for Citibank and many others?
Ask decision makers. I don't really know. What I can say is there was that, actually it was some kind of research where they looked at companies being attacked, and that usually you just want to be a little bit better than the others. It's usually an arms race. If you have your house, you have, or a few houses in the street, you have an alarm, some kind of alarm machinery stuff, and the others don't. You probably won't get attacked, but the others one get burglared, usually. So at the end, it's just an arms race. I am a little bit better than the others, so the others are getting attacked. And this is, of course, one of the points as well to consider. What have the others? How is the landscape of the attacks? How many attacks do we have at all? And then it's just you take that into consideration. Does username password suffice, or do we have to have something else?
Thanks. So, in the end, it seems the good old paper ITAN isn't so bad after all? Or why are banks so keen to get away from that?
Again, in my personal opinion. One is transaction signing won't be possible with that one. So, and the other one is you don't really know who used it. So you have that paper copy something, and you could actually copy it, and your wife could use it, your son, whoever, and you don't really know who used it. Besides that, attackers asked for all the numbers, and users entered all of these numbers. There are users which did this, and if they have some kind of Tamagotchi, they at least can only log in once. So it really isn't that foolproof as other credential types are.
How many attacks do you see?
Ask Switch. No, I can't talk about numbers. Sorry. Please.
Yeah, some comment for the first question. In America, as far as I know, in Canada, you only can transfer money to accounts of the same bank or to registered companies. So you cannot transfer money to some bank account of some other bank. So that's restricted as far as I know.
This is actually a good point. That's also a risk, or some kind of risk management. You say, okay, if you log in with username password, you only have these features, or you have that limit on money, or whatever. And if you log in with stronger authentication, you have a higher limit, or you have no limit at all. But that surely is something which will even come over here, or even more. There are some kind of mechanisms, like PostFinance has that on the handy payment, only, don't know, a few hundred francs you can submit from the handy without any strong authentication. I guess this will come with the online banking as well, but it's only a wild guess.
To follow up on what you just said, I've seen a Swiss bank have different type of accounts. There were people or accounts with read-only. There were accounts with limited privilege to send money. Then there were accounts to enter a transaction, but not able to actually execute it. And then there were accounts where you needed 2 logins by 2 different people into the same account to execute the transactions. So if you think a bit out of the box, there is a lot of more variance what you can actually do. So the problem is not solved. So maybe there are other solutions which could help in your situation.
Are you allowed to comment on the protection of your new mobile solution?
Sorry?
Are you allowed to comment on the protection of the new mobile solution you're rolling out? You may also decline.
What are you interested in the most?
How do you protect it? With which mechanisms?
May we talk about this later at coffee or beer or whatever?
Accepted.
Please, behind you.
So for my German bank account, I think they have a very smart challenge response method, because the input I have to give to the external device is, or part of it is receiver bank account number, and this is challenge, and the response I enter then is based on that input. So even if there would be a man in the middle attack, it would not work, because if you would in the background change the recipient bank account number, the response I enter would not match, and then it would fail, right?
Does the user know what he signs?
Yes, it displays it prompts me to really check that what I'm entering is this.
What system prompts you? It's the computer.
It's the
web
computer, but it
browser.
I have to enter in the external device the bank account number of the recipient, or part of it.
Yeah, but you know that. Does every user of that bank know that he enters the last few parts or whatever of that accounting number?
Yeah,
As example, you could have some kind of a screen popping up after login, which says, this is some kind of test, please enter these numbers. The user enters these numbers, makes the challenge response, and your money is away. So the problem again is the user or the bank has no control over the display of the user, so anything could be written there. And some users are believing it and are sending their money because of that, and don't even recognize. How should they?
okay, I agree.
You had a slide where you announced hope, and then you talked about risk management. Could you explain, please?
What I wanted to say with that is actually most of the discussions were only about credentials and only credentials. And what I wanted to say with that is that the whole story is not only about credentials. Credentials we can't really make secure, or I haven't seen one credential which can't be attacked in one or the other way. So the hope must be coming from somewhere else, or the hope for the solution. And the only solution I currently see is risk management. So at the end, it's just numbers against numbers. Just a second until the mic's coming.
But this term risk management, this sucks for me as end user, because if my bank thinks that we take the risk, but personally I get attacked, it sucks. So it's my pain, not theirs.
Do you know of a customer which had to pay because of a fuck up of the system or an attack and a successful?
Yeah, I know one person. She had to mention that she will go to Kassensturz if they don't pay it back. So
Okay.
and only if when Kassensturz came in, they paid it back. But it
Okay.
was with a PIN code at the teller machine. So
Okay, ATM.
I wanted to say a similar thing. Your bottom line seems to be nothing really works because majority of the users are silly anyway.
Just to interrupt you, the thing I wanted to say is it can't work because there's always an attack.
Yeah, but when you see it from the other side, from the client side, so I think there are big differences between the systems, because if, I'm not so much interested in what the other customers do. I might be interested in securing my transactions, because maybe I get the money back, maybe not. In any case, I will have a lot of trouble to get it back, so I want to avoid this. So if I have a system that gives me some information on a display where I can say, okay, I want this, key in some PIN, not into the computer, but into class 3 card reader or whatever device. So I get something out of that system, even if you from a risk point of view may say, okay, this works for 10% of the users and 90% don't bother. So I think there are a lot of differences which are kind of blurred if you just say at the end the user will always break it up because he doesn't pay attention.
But let's talk about alternatives. There aren't really, at least for me. The only alternative I know is you take your money with you, you go to the next bank or post bureau and have your suitcase with your thousands of francs and you pay it like that. For me, this isn't really an alternative to electronic payment.
No. If I have a system that gives me good security as long as I pay attention to what I do, that's a good alternative for me, and it's much better than a system where I say, okay, like the credit card system. So they say, well, we don't put in any security, or they used to say that, and we just reimburse you if something happens. So I don't like that so much as a system where I say, if I pay attention, look after my money, I won't lose the money. So I think that makes a difference. And also the other thing with of course you have to update any device, you have to be able to update it. So I don't think that's kind of an argument to rule out security out of everything, because I think it's a big difference whether you have to update a PC every day and all the applications and stuff, or whether you have a kind of card reader which you might have to update once in a while, and I think there should be pretty good solutions to handle this. And it's much easier to keep your card reader clean than trying to keep a PC clean.
But then your card reader needs to be the endpoint of the secure channel.
Of course, that can be done, yeah.
Yeah. I guess there was some question in the back somewhere. Or not anymore? No more questions? Then thank you.
Thank you, Adrian.